Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video what we're going to cover is Material MUI5, and this is a terrific React UI library. Now what exactly does that mean? Well, it is a library that provides us with a bunch of UI elements. So for example, if in our React app we need a calendar, we don't have to go ahead and build it on ourselves. What we can do is we can download this library and use this UI element, which is the calendar. So really, it just contains a bunch of UI elements that we can utilize rather than building it from scratch and reinventing the wheel. And right here on the MUI.com website, you can see an example of some of the elements that they have. So over here we have a calendar, over here we have this play button, we have a select, we have different tables, and these actually utilize some of the design best practices, so your application will actually include that in as well. So over here on the MUI.com website, what you can do is you can go to the docs, and then once you go to the docs, let me zoom in here once more, you can actually go to the components. And then in here, you can see all of the different UI elements that you can utilize in your React application. And actually, if you click on one of them, so let's say I click on Alert, you can see some of the examples and you can also see the source code. And because there's so many UI elements in this crash course, we're going to be utilizing and learning how to use the documentation to incorporate these elements inside of our application. So we're going to be in the docs a lot because we're not going to be able to cover all of these elements in this crash course, else this crash course would probably be like 10 hours long. Alright, so with that being said, let's actually look at what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a tourism website. So over here you can see we have a tourism website and we have a bunch of different tours. These are the top Niagara tours, these are the top Las Vegas tours, and you can see that there's a lot of UI elements going on. First of all, we have this app bar, and then over here we have these cards, and within these cards we have this ratings, we have, price, we have this icon right over here. So there's a bunch of things going on. And then once you go ahead and you go to a specific tour, you get redirected to this page. And well, in this page there's even more going on. So we have this image, and we also have this cool collage of images, as you can see, that you can scroll. So you can learn more about the tour through these images. Then we have this text over here just telling us about the ticket. And then we have this accordion that shows you all of the frequently asked questions. And then over here at the very bottom, let me just zoom in here, you can see that there's this fixed bottom navigation, and there's this button that says book now. And what that does is it triggers a modal with a calendar, and you can actually go ahead and book. Now, none of this will be functional, but this is just for purposes of teaching you Material UI. So there's actually a lot of things going on, and if we had to build all these things from scratch, well, it would take us a very, very long time. But you're going to be surprised how easy it is to build something like this with Material UI, because all of the UI elements are already pre-built. So, well, that's enough of that. Let's actually just get right into it, into the next section. Like I said in the introduction, it is super important to get a good handle on the docs because there's so many different components out there in Material UI. So in this section and all the previous sections, what we're going to do is focus in on a specific goal, and then we're going to go to the docs to try to accomplish that goal. So the first thing that I want to do is, let's go over here to our demo of what we want to accomplish. I want to just simply build out this card. Very simple, and so nothing insanely difficult. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the docs and learn exactly how we can build out something like this. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a React application, and that's exactly what I did. I created a bare bone React application. As you can see right over here, let me just zoom in once more. So as you can see here, we have just a bare bone React app. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick cleanup. So I'm going to get rid of everything in here. So let's get rid of that. And then over here, we can get rid of this. And let's save that. And actually, let's keep the app.css. But inside of the app.css, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also get rid of all of these styles. So we're just doing a little bit of cleanup here. And then let's go ahead and download Material UI inside of our React application. Now, of course, to do this, let's go to the documentation. And once we go to the documentation, you can see that we have this Getting Started tab. Let me zoom in here once more. You can see here that we have this Getting Started tab. And over here, you can see installation. So let's go ahead and install this. And you can see here that to install this package, what we need to run is npm install @MUI/material. And there's some other libraries that we can also install as well that are complementary to Material UI. So let's go ahead and copy this. We're going to go ahead and copy that. And we're just going to paste that into our terminal. So let's go here, let's paste that in, and that should be a-okay. So once we wait, let's actually go back to our to the installation docs, and let's scroll down. And you can see here that it says Material UI was designed with Roboto font in mind. So be sure to follow these instructions, for instance, via Google Font Web. So essentially what it's saying is it wants you to take this link tag and append it inside of your index.html, because this is the Google font that links it to the Roboto font. So let's go over here and let's go to the public, and let's actually paste that link in as well. So we're going to go here and we're going to paste in that link so we can have the Roboto font inside of our application. All right, so that is terrific. The last thing that I want to do is I want to go to my index.css file. So inside of this index.css file, I want to just get rid of these default styles, and I want to have a style that applies to every single element. So we're going to have over here this wildcard, the star, and this means that, hey, I want a specific style applied to every single element. So what I want is, if we don't specify any margin, I want the margin to initially be 0. And then what I also want is the padding to initially be 0 if it's not specified. I want the box sizing to be border box. And then also, let's say that the font family is going to be Roboto. So font family, and we can say Roboto for this. All right, so very, very simple. So now if we were to go to our React application, you can see that it is completely empty. So remember, now what do I want to do? Well, I want to build this card. So let's go to the Material UI documentation, and let's go to the components section. So in this component section, you can see here that there's different categories. There's input, autocomplete, button, checkbox. Well, I don't really need an input. Data display, this isn't really data display. Feedback, this isn't really feedback as well. Let's go over here, we have surfaces. Okay, surfaces seems like exactly what I need. And you can see here that there's actually two different components that we might be able to utilize, card or paper. Now let's actually go ahead and click on card. And you can see here that this is, well, exactly similar to what we want. We want to have a card like this. So, okay, we found our component. And what we can do is we can actually click on the source code just to see exactly how it was built out. So this is terrific. However, I actually personally do not want to use card. I actually prefer to use paper. So paper is very, very similar to card, except it just gives it more of a paper feel, if you will. So let's go ahead and let's click on paper. And this is really just a personal preference. So if we click on paper, you can see here that it kind of looks more like a paper, if you will. And you can see that, well, all you need to do is get this paper component and we pass it in a prop of elevation. And you can see that the more elevation it has, the more it feels that it's elevated from the surface. And if we were to scroll down over here, you can see some other props. You can also give it variant outlined. And we can also give it square to make it square rather than rounded. And you can see here all of the different elevation levels. So you can see elevation of 0, it's not elevated at all. Elevation of 1, it seems like it's barely elevated. Whereas an elevation of 24, it seems like it's just really floating out of the surface. And the design is basically a box shadow or something like that. So let's go ahead and let's utilize paper. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to go to source and I'm going to create a components directory. And in here, I'm going to create a tourcard.js file. And let's go ahead and let's create just a very simple function-based component. So let's go here and we're going to say tour card. And then here, we're just going to return a very simple div for now. So just go ahead and do that. And inside of this div, I'm just going to say hello. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this div. Let's just get rid of all of this. And of course, what we need to do is export default. So let's export default to our card. So I'm going to take this div and I'm just going to place it right in here. Or I'm going to take the component and place it right in here. So I'm going to say tour card. And I'll notice that it auto imported. And if we save that, and then we go to our app, you can see that we should see this hello right over here. Awesome. So I'm zoomed in 400%. For you, it's probably going to be significantly smaller. So now let's actually go ahead and start utilizing this paper component, this UI element inside of our card. So in order to do this, let's actually look at the source code here. And you can see that the source code, all we need to do is import this paper component from @material/material/paper. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and let's import that in. And we don't want to import it in here. We want to import it in the tour card. So let's go here. We're going to import that in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this, instead of being inside of a div, we're going to wrap it inside of a paper component that we get from Material UI. So let's go ahead and just save that. And let's see how that looks here. So you can see that automatically looks a little bit different. So you can see that we have a little bit of a box shadow. There's a little bit of an elevation. Now, of course, what we can do to change the elevation is just pass elevation, and we can give the elevation whatever value we want. So we can say 10 if we want to. Now you can see here that it seems like it's more elevated. I'm going to say 3 personally. I like that. So I'm going to say 3. And of course, we can also say square to make it more squared. I think I spelled that incorrectly. Square. So now you can see that it's squared. As you can see, look at the corners. And when I remove it, it's going to be more rounded. So let's go here. You can see that now it's rounded. I personally prefer it being rounded. And we can also say variant, and we can say something like outlined if we want to. And now you can see that there's an outline around it, but there's no box shadow. And I honestly do not prefer that. I like the box shadow. So let's just say elevation. All right, so you can see here that we went ahead and created a very, very simple component, and we did that by reading the documentation. And that's what we're going to be doing thoroughly throughout this crash course. So this is a great step. However, there's a huge problem. So if you look at our card right now, and let me just zoom out, you can see that our card is relatively small. Obviously, it doesn't span the whole width of our screen. It's relatively small, and you can see that it's centered. All of our content is centered in the middle, as you can see here, somewhere in the middle. So you can see that there's some spacing here, and there's also some spacing here, and obviously our card is a lot smaller. So how can we accomplish this with Material UI? We can actually accomplish this with layouts, and we'll get to that in the next section. So the first thing that I want to do is this effect right over here. I want to put everything right in the center with a little bit of spacing in the left and the right. So a little bit of spacing horizontally. So how can we accomplish this? Well, let's go to the documentation. Let's go to the components section. And then in the components section, let's scroll down until we find the layouts category. And as you can see here, this is the layouts category. And over here, we have a bunch of different components that we can utilize to better lay out all of the other components within our application. So these components are just strictly for laying out our application. So the first thing that we're going to look at, and we're going to look at many of these, but the first thing we're going to look at is container. Let's go ahead and click on container. And you can see here that the container centers your content horizontally. It's the most basic layout element. Okay, so what does this mean? So it centers everything horizontally. Let's actually scroll down here, and you can see that it does exactly what I want right over here. You can see what it does is it doesn't take up the entire width, and then it also centers this content horizontally. So this right here is the container, and then everything outside isn't the container. And this is exactly what I want over here. So I want to have a container that doesn't take up the entire width and then centers it horizontally. So that's exactly what we are going to utilize, is the container component. And over here you can see we can also give it a max width if we want to. We can also take a look at the source code just to see exactly how things are done. So what we can do here is you can just import container. And let's actually put this inside of the app. So we're going to import container from Material UI, and we're going to put this inside of the app so that everything inside of the application is going to be nice and centered. So let's go here and let's just get rid of this. Let's go over here and let's add a container component. We're going to say container. I'm going to, of course, close it off. And that's pretty much all we need to do. And now if we were to go over here, you can see that now it is nice and centered and it's not spanning the entire width. However, of course, there is still a problem. Now it's spanning the entire width of the container, and obviously that's not what I want. I want it to be, relatively small. I want to be able to fit 4 of them, 4 cards inside of a container with a little bit of spacing. Now, how can we accomplish this? Well, there's actually a few ways that we can accomplish this if we are not using Material UI. From a styling purpose, we can probably use something like Flexbox or Grid. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to use the grid. And the reason for this is because if we go back over here, you can see that we have this grid component that is going to simulate the grid CSS layout. So over here, what we can do, and if you don't know grid, that's completely fine. Over here, what we can do is you can see that we can actually accomplish something that looks exactly like this by having, well, components that look like this. So what we can do here is you can have a grid container. So you can have this grid container, and we specify that this is a grid container by saying container. And then we're going to say that any item within this container is going to have a spacing of 2. So over here, this spacing right here is 2. And then in here, we're also going to have the same grid component, but we're going to specify that this is going to be an item. And we're going to give it a size of 8. So in grid, the total size horizontally in a specific row is 12. So by saying 8, that means it's going to span 8 out of 12 of the row. So if I can do that math correctly, 8 divided by 12, that's 4 divided by 6, which is 2 divided by 3. So around, 66%. As you can see here, that is going to be 66% of this specific row. And then over here, we have this other grid item, and this is 4. Well, that's going to be the other 33%. And as you can see here, we have the other 33%. Now, if I wanted to accomplish something like this, so I can have 4 evenly sized cards within a row, then what I would have to do is give this a XS of 3. So that we have 3, 3, 3, 3, which equals to 12. So we're going to do something like this. So the first thing, of course, that we need to do is we need to wrap everything inside of the grid container. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're actually going to do that inside of the app.js component. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So let's go here. And let's actually just remove the, should we remove this? I say we leave it. Let's just leave it for now. And what I want to do is I want to wrap the tour card within a grid component. So we're going to say import, and we're going to import grid from @material UI. And the reason why we're doing @material UI / and then whatever it is that we want, whereas we could also do something like this, which is a little bit cleaner, just destructure out everything that we need over here. So container and then grid. We could do it this way, but the reason why I like to do it this way is that we're specifically asking for the grid, and we're not going to get anything additional imported into this component. So let's go here, and we're going to say grid. We're going to specify that this is going to be a container, and we're also going to give it a spacing of, let's give it a spacing of 5. And then in here, we're going to have our tour card. Now our tour card, we also need to import this because our tour card is going to be the item. So the item itself, the grid item. So let's go here. And now wrap this with the grid item. So we're going to say here grid. And we're going to close that off. We're going to say that this is a grid item. So a grid item. And we're going to give it an XS that is equal to 3. So that we can have 4 different cards inside of our row. Let's go ahead and paste back the paper. And that's really all we need. And now if we went over here, you can see that our card is nice and beautiful. How terrific is that? Really, really good layout. So now if I were to add, you know, 3 more cards, you can see that it's nice and laid out correctly the way that I want it to. Now if I change my mind, I was like, okay, I actually want to have 3 cards per row, then I would just very simply change this item over here to 4. Because remember, 4 plus 4 plus 4, that's going to be equal to 12. That means 3 cards. And of course, if I want to also reduce the spacing, I can do 2 here. I can do whatever it is that I want. I like 5, and also I want to change this back to 4. All right, so that's pretty much all it is that we need for layouts. And of course, there's going to be other layout components that we are going to get into. So box is a very popular one that we're going to get into. And also image list, we're going to get into that as well. Stack and hidden we're not going to get into. Of course, we're not going to get into everything. But, you know, hopefully you guys kind of understand the premise of this. All right, so let's actually move on and let's actually just make this component or make this card component look like this right over here, because it's kind of looking pretty ugly right now. In this section, what we're gonna do is finish off our card component, because right now it looks like this. Of course, we want it to look like this. So let's quickly inspect what's going on here. Well, of course, we have the image itself at the very top, but what I want to focus in on is this section right over here. You can see that this section is filled with text. We have the title, the duration, the reviews, as well as the price. And you can see that this text is formatted and styled differently. This one's large and skinny. The font weight is a little bit small. This one's a little bit smaller. This is small, but this is even smaller than that, whereas this one's larger and bold. So how are we going to deal with text inside of Material UI? Well, there's actually a good way of dealing with it, because there's a component inside of Material UI called Typography. And we're going to use that component to build this text right over here and format it the way that we want it to. So let's get right into it. But before we do that, let's actually start off with the image. The image is, I think, the easiest thing to do, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go here to our tour card. And inside of our tour card, the first thing that I want to do is I want to add the image. So let's go inside of the paper, let's remove the hello, and we want to add an image. Now, is there an image component inside of Material UI? If you do some digging around, no, there isn't. So what you're going to need to do is just simply use a image tag. So go ahead and use this image tag. And inside of this image tag, what we're going to do is we are going to supply it with an image URL. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to do copy image address. And you can go ahead and take all this data from my GitHub page, and I'll link it in the description below. Or you can just search for any picture of Niagara Falls and just put it inside of your source. So at this point, you can see here that we get this right over here. So each card has this image. Obviously, this isn't exactly the way that we want it. We want to style it a little bit differently. So the best thing to do in this case is to add some styles. So let's actually go to our app.css, and in here we're going to add some styles for the image. So let's give this a class of image, and then here this is where we're going to apply some of these styles that we need for the image. So we're going to say that we want this to have a width of 100, so span the width of the card, as well as a height of 5 rems. And then once we go over here to the tour card, we can actually give this a class name of image. And now if we were to go over here, you can see that this is looking a lot better. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to move on right over here to the typography. So let's go to our tour card, and then inside of our tour card, well, let's go ahead and import that typography component. So to import that, let's actually try to find it inside of the documentation. Let's go here, let's try to find it. Where could it be? Let's do a quick search, typography, and there we go. It's right here under data display. So let's go click on that. And you can see here that it's using Roboto. Okay, we already have that. That's completely fine. And you can see here all of the different types of fonts. So you can see this is how an H1 is going to look, an H2 is going to look, an H3 is going to look. And over here we have different paragraphs, etc. So this is really cool. This is exactly what we want. So how do we utilize this? Well, we utilize this by using the typography component, as you can see right over here. And we're going to pass in two props. We're going to pass in the variant, and then we're going to pass in the component. So the variant is how this is going to look. So if we say that the variant is going to be H1, then it's going to look like this. Then this typography is going to look like this. However, the component is saying, well, what HTML element is going to be. In this case, we're going to say H2. So right here, what we have is an H2 element that looks like an H1. So over here, so this right here would be an H2 element. And this is really cool. So maybe sometimes we want something really large as an H1, but we want it to be an H2. We can go ahead and do that with the variant and component. So let's go ahead and start with the title. So the title is the first thing that we want to do. So let's go here to our, let's go to here and let's see how things are imported. So let's just go here, let's look at the source code and typography. Where is typography? Let's go here to the source code and you can see we can import typography. So we're gonna import typography. And then right in here, what we wanna do is we wanna supply it with the tour name. So what we can say is right under the image, what we can have is a typography component, and let's close it off. And we're gonna say here the tour is immerse into the falls. Immerse, I don't even know how to spell that. I forgot how to spell it. Immerse into the falls. I'm just gonna copy it. So immerse into the falls. And what we're gonna do is I want this to actually be an H2 because it's pretty important, but it's not a header. So I'm gonna say H2. And let's actually give it the variant of H2 as well. So we're gonna say variant of H2 just to see how it looks like, H2. And now if I were to come here, okay, this is a lot bigger than I wanted. Okay, maybe I can change it to an H4. So this way it's still gonna be an H2, but the look of it is gonna be a little bit different. And just to prove it to you, you can actually go ahead and inspect this and you can see that it's an H2. All right, this is also very, very big. So, well, what can I do here? I'm a little stuffed. Let's go back to the documentation. And inside of the documentation, you can see all of the different types that we have. So we have H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, but we also have subtitle and then subtitle, and we also have body and body. I think actually subtitle might work best for me. And of course, you can always take a look at the examples that they have. I want something that looks like this or like this. So I'm gonna use subtitle for this. And so let's go over here and let's use, let's use subtitle 1. So we're gonna say subtitle 1. I think this is good, and we're gonna give it a component of H2. And now right away you can see, okay, this is looking good. This is incredible. Okay. Now the one thing that I'm noticing here is over here we have a little bit of padding. So we have this padding. So this image doesn't have any padding, but anything inside of here, any of the text has this padding so that it's not immersed right into the walls. Obviously over here, well, we don't have that padding. So maybe we can actually fix this. And we're actually going to use another layout component to fix this. So to fix this, what we're going to do is we're going to import box. And this is going to be another important layout component, and this box component simply acts as a div, as a wrapper for all of the other elements that we want. So we're going to get this from box. So box, and over here again, you can just simply treat this as a div. So over here, we're going to say box, We're going to wrap it inside of the box. Now this of course doesn't do anything, because now what we need to do is apply some styling inside of this box. So what we can do here actually is just say padding, and then inside of padding we can very simply say 1. And what this will do is it give us padding in the x-axis as well as the y-axis. And now you can see that we have this good padding that we wanted all along. So actually, I do not want this padding to be on the top. I just want it to be left and right. So maybe I can actually say padding X instead. And that way, okay, that looks a lot better to me. All right, cool. So what's the next thing that we need inside of here? Well, we need this right here, which is going to be the duration. So let's go ahead and add that in. Now over here, you can notice that we also have this icon. So how are we going to add this icon? What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wrap this right here, this section right over here. I'm going to wrap it inside of a box as well, because I think it should be containerized inside of a div. So I'm going to wrap it inside of a box, and I'm going to give it a display of flex so it can display horizontally. So I'm going to say box. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, how can I add these custom styles? I can add custom styles by utilizing the prop SX. And then over here, we can give it an object of all of these styles that we want. So I'm going to say display flex. And I'm also going to say align items center. Align items center. All right, awesome. And then in here, well, we're going to display some of our, we're going to display that duration. So let's go over here and let's say typography. And I'm going to say, let's just hard code 5 hours for now. And let's give it a variant. We're going to give it a variant of body this time. Let's say body 2. So body 2. And we're also going to give it a component of paragraph. So it can be a p tag. All right, let's go ahead and save that. And if we were to come here, okay, it's looking good. It's looking pretty decent actually. It's not bad. However, of course, what's happening here is, okay, so what I need to do is I need to get this box, and I have to wrap it inside of this box right over here. So I can get the padding all around. Now this is a little bit bigger than I wanted to. You can see that this is relatively big. So I actually do not want it to be this big. And I'm going to show you how we can actually customize these styles a little bit later, of these variants a little bit later. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. Okay, so we'll just leave that as is. Now what we need is the icon. So how are we going to get the icon? Now in order to get the icon, what we need to do is install another library that is associated to Material UI. So let's open up our terminal, and we're going to do an npm install. We're going to say @MUI, and then we're going to say icons, and then we're going to say material. So let's go ahead and install that. And this is going to give us access to a bunch of different Material UI icons. So let's just wait. Shouldn't take too long. And once that downloads, and it did, what we can do here is import a bunch of icons from @Material UI, the package that we just installed, @Material UI /icons material. And what I want, and you can of course explore this, all of the different icons that you want, but I want the access time icon. So I'm going to say access time. And all we need to do to utilize this icon is just render the component. So let's go over here inside of this second box, and we're going to say access time, and let's just render that component. And now if I were to save this and refresh, let's see here, it's taking a little bit of time. Let's open up our terminal just to see what's going on. Did anything fail? I guess it's still compiling. It's taking its sweet time to compile. So let's refresh again. I'm just gonna pause the video and wait until this is done compiling. Alright, so it finished compiling, and now as you can see we have our icon. However, the icon is a little bit too big. I would like it to be a little bit smaller. So what we can do here is we can go to the icon itself, and then inside of the icon, we can also supply it with the SX over here. And then here, what we're gonna say is that this is gonna be equal to a width, and we're gonna say that the width is gonna be equal to 12.5. I just went ahead and then played around with it, and I found that 12.5 is the best width. So if I refresh this, you can see that it's a lot smaller. However, right now I also again want this text to be smaller, but we just pretty much use the smallest variant. So what we're gonna need to do is figure out a way to make this variant even smaller than it is. But we'll do that a little bit later. Another thing that I want to do is I want to have a little bit of spacing between these two. Let me zoom in. A little bit of spacing between the icon and the text. So in order to do that, what we can do here is we can just very simply do a margin left. And then we're going to say this margin left is going to be equal to 0.5. And now you can see there's a little bit of spacing there. All right, awesome. So the next thing that we need to work on is this right over here. So let's actually add this in a box itself because we're going to have to do some styling as well. So let's add another box in here. Let's create a box. So right here we have another box, and let's also give this the same styles that we have in this box. So we're going to get the styles. We're going to apply those styles in here. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want the ratings. So let's go to Material UI, and let's actually just explore the components, because there is a component called rating. And as you can see here, well, we can get the controlled rating where somebody can actually select the rating, which makes sense. And then over here we have this read-only rating. And this is actually what we want to use. So over here, we don't want people to select whatever rating it is. We want to show them, okay, this has 4.5 rating. So instead of using controlled, we want to use read-only. You can also say disabled if we ever wanted that, or no rating given if we also wanted that. So let's actually look at the source code of how this was created. So we're going to have to import rating. So let's go here. Let's import rating. And then in here, let's just go ahead and quickly save this so we can format it better. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to supply it with the rating. So we're going to supply it with the rating. And this rating is going to take in a few props. Because as you can see here, we have the name, which is going to be, you know, whether it's controlled or whether it's read-only. And then over here, we have the value, which is going to be, you know, whether it's 3 out of 5 stars, 3.5 out of 5 stars, 4, 4.5, etc. And then over here, there's the on change. However, we don't need an on change because again, this is going to be read only. So you can see here that this right here is kind of similar to what we're going to be using. We're going to be using the name read only. Then we're going to also supply it with a value. We're going to give it this read only prop as well. So let's actually just go ahead and copy this. And let's just paste that in there. Okay, that is good. Very, very good. So let's save this and let's actually just give it a value of 4.5. So let's go here and let's see how that looks at the moment. All right, so you can see that it's there, which is really cool. However, there's a few problems. For one, it's pretty big. I would love for it to be a little bit smaller. And we also gave it a rating of 4.5. So I think it would be nice to show half the star at the very end rather than the full star. I'm not sure why it's showing all of these stars. So there's a few things that we actually need to fix. In order to fix this, let's actually go back to the documentation. And the first thing is rating precision. So if we wanted to use a floating value, which is something like 0.5, we have to specify the precision. So over here, by saying a precision of 0.5, that means that we can give ratings that have 0.5 within it. So something like, again, 2.5, 4.5, whatever. So if I were to go here and I say precision, and I were to say 0.5, that should fix this issue. You can see here now we have the half star. If I were to, however, change this to 4.75, you can see that, well, we don't have that level of precision anymore, because remember, we specified that this is only 0.5 level of precision. If we wanted to the 0.25 level of precision, we can actually put that in there, and it's very faintly, it's very small. You can see right here that the star is not covered. So this little part of the star. Hope you guys saw that. But of course, I just want 0.5. I'm okay with that, and let's give it 4.5. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to make it smaller. So over here you can look at the sizing. So what we can do is we can just give it a size prop that is either going to be small or large, and by default it's going to be medium. So I think I'm going to give it small. So let's go ahead here, let's copy this, and let's give this a size of small. Let's paste that right in there. And by doing that, you can see that, okay, now it's looking a lot better. Okay, there is a little bit of spacing here, as you can see. So what we can do is, to the box, we can give it a margin top. So inside of this box that's housing the rating and all of the text, we can also give this a margin. We can margin top. We can put this in here if we want to, or we can just very simply just say margin top. And then we can give this margin top of, let's give it a margin top of 3. Let's save that. And there we go. All right, so that's pretty good. So now what we need is, well, we need the 4.5 as well as the reviews themselves. So let's go ahead and figure out how we can do that. I mean, we're gonna do that with typography, of course. So let's go ahead over here. And in here, so right after the rating, we're gonna add another typography. So we're gonna say typography. So typography, and we're gonna actually make this the exact same size as this right over here, which is the duration. So over here we can give it the exact same properties, except we'll give it a margin left of, let's give it a margin left of 1 point. No, actually, you know what? We'll leave it as this. 0.5 I think is a-okay. So in here, what we're gonna do is we are gonna supply it with the rating, which is gonna be 4.5. So we can actually end up seeing what the rating is. So 4.5, and this is what I'm talking about right over here. So 4.5, and now what we want is, we want this right over here, the number of reviews, and you can see that this is extra small. However, the issue that we're facing here is, well, the body 2 is the smallest that we can get. So again, I'll show you how we can change it a little bit later. But for now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna just say the number of reviews is gonna be just 655, and we're gonna say reviews. We're gonna wrap this in parentheses. And what I'm gonna say for now is this is gonna be a body 3, even though this doesn't even exist. Let's give it a margin left of 1.5. Okay, so with that being said, you can see here that it's really big. You know, we'll fix that a little bit later. So the last thing that we need is this over here, which is the price. We can put this in its own box as well, even though it might not be as necessary, but it's good to kind of put things into their own little containers, just in case. So over here we can have a box, and then we can have another typography. I'm just gonna copy this typography, and this one's gonna be nice and bolded. So we're gonna say that the variant is gonna be H6. However, the component itself, let's say H3. And do we need a margin? Well, we need some margin top, so we'll say margin top of 0. So margin top of 0. All right. So if you were to save this, and then over here we can just say from, I'm gonna say C for Canadian dollars, and then I'm gonna say, I don't know, $147. And if we were to go here, you can see that we have our wonderful card. So it's getting close. I mean, there's still a lot to do, to be quite honest, but it's getting there. You can see when I zoom out, it actually looks a little bit better. So it's definitely getting there. However, the issue that we're facing is that, you know, we need to be able to customize some of our own fonts, because I want to make this a little bit smaller. I want to make this smaller. I also kind of want to make this smaller over here. So how do we do that? Let's get to it in the next section. In this section, what we're going to do is learn exactly how we can customize our own styles. And we can do that by utilizing theme providers in Material UI. So let's just first look at exactly what we want to customize. We want to customize the font. We want the body 2 to be a little bit smaller than it is right now. And we want to create a new body 3 field, and we want to make it extremely small. So how can we do this? Well, like I said, we can do this with theme providers. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a theme. And we can get that from Material UI. So what I can do here is from Material UI, I can import create theme. I'm going to destructure this. I'm going to say from Material UI, I'm going to say at MUI material, I'm going to get this thing called create theme. So create theme. And then over here, what I can very simply do is say theme is equal to create theme. And this is going to be a something that we're going to invoke. And we're going to pass in an object. And this is where the customization is going to occur. So the first thing is we have to specify what component we want to customize. So we're going to say components, and specifically what we want to customize is the typography components in Material UI. So to specify this, all we have to say is MUI and then, well, typography. So we're going to say typography. And of course we can do this for any component. So you can do this for any component that we want. But again, we want to do this for typography. So let's do it for typography. And then what we want to say is, well, we want to start specifying some of the different variants inside of the typography. So over here we can say variants. And then here what we're going to do is we're going to supply to then an array of variants. So and each array is going to be an object. And then the first property in the object is going to be the props. So the props. And the props over here, we're going to say that we want the prop that is variant. So over here, you can see that we have this prop right here that is going to be variant. And we want this to be equal to body 2. So if we supply a variant that is equal to body 2 as a prop, then what styles do we want? Well, we want the style of font size 11. So let's actually just look at this one more time. So we're going to create a theme. We're saying that, hey, we want to manipulate the typography component in Material UI, and we want to update the variants. And so over here, this is going to be an array. So over here, we have this prop. So over here, we have this prop inside of our array, and we're saying that if the variant is equal to body 2, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the font size is 11. And now let's actually do the same exact thing, but for body 3. So let's go ahead and copy this. And over here, we're going to say body 3. So this right here is going to override body 2. This one's going to add a new prop. And we're going to change this one to font size of 9. Font size of 9. So now how can we utilize this? Because if I were to save this and then refresh here, you can see that nothing has changed. So in order to utilize this, what we need to do is to import something else called the theme provider. So over here, we can import something called the theme provider. And what we can do is we need to wrap all of the components that we want to have this specific theme that we created with the theme provider. So I'm just going to wrap it around the paper. So over here, I'm going to say theme provider. We're going to close it off. We're going to have a closing tag right over here as well. The theme provider. And then as a prop, we're going to supply it with the theme. And then we're going to say the theme that we just created. So theme. So if I were to save this, now you can see that it has changed. So we were able to do this. Now, of course, we can actually change this to whatever it is that we want. We can add multiple styles. So we can say, hey, we also want the background color to be blue, for instance. So now you can see here, we also are going to get a blue background color. So we can add whatever styles it is that we want. Of course, I don't want that. All right, and we could again do this for multiple different components. It doesn't matter exactly what the component is. And this is a way that we can customize our styles. There's a few more things that we need to complete in order to finish the landing page. So the first thing that we need to do is to add the app bar. And then the second thing that we need to do is need to add this title right over here that shows all of the best tours for a specific city. So let's begin with the app bar. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the documentation and we're going to search for app bar. So let's go ahead and look for it. And over here you can see in services we have an app bar. And over here you can see that, well, there's multiple different app bars that we can utilize. Now, the app bar is kind of a special component because it's not comprised of just one component. It's actually made up of multiple components. So I actually want to use something that looks like this. And you can see here, if we were to click on the source code, there is an app bar component, but it's going to be sandwiched with a bunch of other components and styles. So you can see here we have a bit of styles. We have over here more styles for the icon wrapper. So there's a bunch of different things going on. And at this point, it's actually best to simply just copy this and modify it as you go. So what we can do here is you can just simply copy all of this code. And in here, we can create an appbar.js file. Maybe you can capitalize the bar. And we can just simply paste this in. And over here, again, I mean, a lot of this stuff we've already learned. You can see here we're using a bunch of different components, and we're kind of creating this app bar with it. So I think we're going to leave this as is. Over here, we also have a bunch of different styles. So this is another way of styling components. So over here, we're using styled components where we're styling a specific div, and we're giving it all of these styles. And then over here, the search icon wrapper, we're going to be using it down here. So this is just another different way of styling our component. You can also just use a plain old div and just give them these styles. So I'm just going to keep this as is. And then over here, I'm going to just call this an app bar, or we'll leave it as actually search app bar, even though it's not really going to have any search functionality. So inside of the app.js, what we want to do is we want to, well, utilize the search app bar, but we do not want to put it inside of the container because we want it to span the width of our entire screen. So if we were to put it inside of the container, you can see here, if I were to refresh, you can see here that it's only spanning the width of the container. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to move it outside of the container, and we're going to go ahead and save that. And now you can see that it's looking a lot better. Now over here for the margin, let's also give it a margin. We're going to give it a margin. Let's give it a margin of Y inside of the container, a margin Y that is going to be equal to 5. So let's go here. Let's give this a quick refresh. Actually, that doesn't seem to work. So instead, what we're going to do is let's give it an SX. And we're going to say here margin. And then we're going to say margin Y of 5. And there we go. So now we have a little bit of spacing between the cards as well as the app bar. Alright, so that's really cool. And again, we can customize this however way we want, but for me, I'm just gonna leave it as is. The next thing that I want to do is I want to add this right over here. And I actually also want to start dynamically displaying some of these inputs or some of these cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my GitHub page, and over here I have a bunch of JSON that is going to contain data for these cards. So go ahead, I'll link in the description below. And then what you can do here is inside of the source, create a data.json file. And then in here, we're going to paste that JSON in here. So this is going to be an array of objects. And then the object is going to be the name of the city. So the city first. And then this city is going to have a property called tours. And then that's also going to be an array of objects. And this is going to be each individual tour. So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over the city to get the city. And then we're going to iterate over the city's tours to get the tours. So it's not insanely difficult, actually. So let's actually go ahead and we'll do that right now. So in order to do this, right now we're working in the app.js. Later on, we're probably going to migrate from the app.js, but for now, let's just leave it as is. And so what we want to do is we want to render the city and the city name, and then we want to render the cards. So for now, let's just go ahead and comment this out. I'm just going to comment this out for now. And we're going to import these cities from that JSON data. So we're going to show cities from, and I believe this is going to be from the same directory, data.json. Okay. And we're going to iterate over that. So we're going to say cities.map. And then over here for each city, what I am going to do is return. So let's go here. We're going to return. And we are going to return typography. So we're going to return the typography. Let's go ahead and import that. Notice that it auto imported. We're going to say that this is going to be the variant that is equal to h4. We're going to say that the component is equal to h2. We're also going to say that we want a margin top that is equal to 5. And also a margin bottom that is equal to 3. So very, very simple. And of course, what we need to do is we need a closing typography tag. And then in here, we're going to say top and then city.name and then tours. So if we were to refresh this, you can see here that we get top Niagara tours, top Las Vegas tours. Okay, so this is good. But now what we need to do is we need to start iterating over the tours inside of the city. So what we can actually do here is you can wrap this inside of a fragment. So you can say fragment here. So we can leave this typography in. And then what we can do is we can get this grid, paste that in there, uncomment it. And then inside of the grid, inside of this grid, what we're going to do is we're going to start iterating over the city.tours.map. And then for each tour, and we can, of course, supply it with a key. You should probably do that. So we'll supply it with the key over here. So let's go over here. For each tour, what we want to do is we want to return that tour card. So we're going to say here, tour card. And what we're also going to do is we're going to pass in the tour as a prop. So tour as a prop, and let's also ask for the index, so we can use that as a key. So you can say key, which is going to be the index. Let's go ahead and save that. So now inside of the tour card, we have to do a little bit of adjusting. So what we need to do is we need to accept the tour. And then in here, this is not going to be a hard-coded image. Instead, it's going to be tour.img, which is, if you look at the JSON, it's going to be, or actually, it's going to be image like this. And then here, this is going to be tour.name, I believe. Let's double check, name. Over here, we're going to have tour.duration, so tour.duration. Here we're going to have tour.rating. Also same thing over here. And then here we're going to say number of reviews. So right over here, we're going to say tour.number of reviews. And lastly over here, we're going to say tour.price. Okay, so now if we were to save this, and if we were to go back, you can see that everything has changed. So, well, we completed the very first page, which is really good, and I think we learned a lot. And now let's move on to the next page. So the next page is going to look something like this. And honestly, this isn't going to be very difficult because we've already learned a lot of the principles, even though this looks a lot more complicated. We learned a lot of the principles. We learned how to use docs. So we're probably just going to breeze through this page. So we finished our very first page, but now what we want to do is we want to work on the second one. In order to create a multiple page application, this is where we're going to have to introduce routing to our app. So there isn't anything material UI specific here, so I do kind of expect you to know how to do this, but let's just do it together nonetheless. So in order to do this, the first thing that we need to do is install a few dependencies. So let's go over here to our terminal, and we are going to install React Router DOM. So this is the library that we're going to utilize to introduce routing inside of our React app. So we're going to do npm install, and then we're going to say React Router DOM. React Router DOM. So let's go ahead and install that in. And let's give it a few seconds. Now we're going to introduce React Router DOM right in here inside of the app.js. So what we actually need to do is we need to start moving some of this stuff from the app.js into its own page. So inside of the source directory, let's create a pages directory. And in here, we're going to create a home.js file. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to go ahead and grab all of this. So I'm going to grab all of this, and I'm going to create a function-based component called home. So const home is equal to a function-based component that returns all of this stuff right over here. And of course, we're going to do an export default of home. We're also going to need to import all of this over here. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and import that, and that should be everything. So just to double check that everything is working a-okay, inside of the app.js file, you can just render the home component that I'm going to auto-import the home component, and let's get rid of this. And we should get the same exact, oh well, not really. So the issues that we're having here are some paths. So over here, what we can do is we can just move out of there, and I believe that should work. So if we move out of the pages directory, then we hit the components. Yep, that should work. And over here, we should do the exact same thing. And over here, exact same thing. Okay, so you can see that it looks exactly the same. Awesome. So now what we want to do is we want to introduce React Router DOM inside of our app.js. Again, kind of expect you to know how to do this already. So we're going to import a few things from React Router DOM. We're going to import browser router. We're also going to import routes and route. So those are the things that we're going to import. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this with browser router. And then over here, we're going to have routes. And then over here, we're going to have a route. And this is going to have the path of just slash. So path is equal to slash. And over here, what we want to do is we want to render the element homepage. So you want to render the home component. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so that's pretty much all it is that we need to do. Another thing that I'd actually like to do is remove the search bar from here and actually just put it inside of the app component, because we're gonna want it for every single one of our pages. So we're gonna say here, search app bar. We're gonna go ahead and save that. And as you can see here, this works a-okay. So now what we need is another page, and this page we're going to call it the tour page. So we're going to say here tour, so tour.js. And let's create another function-based component for this. So we're going to say tour, and let's have this return a div that just says hello. And we're going to do export default tour. And then in here, we're going to add another route. And this is going to be a dynamic path. And over here, we're going to say that we want to supply it with the ID. And we're going to do it dynamically. That's why we have the colon. And over here, we're going to say tour. And that's it. So that's, I think, all it is that we need. So now if we go to slash or whatever, so let's say /3, we get hello, as you can see here. And we also get the nav bar. So now what we need to do is we need to create the tour component. Now typically what would happen is you wouldn't do something like /5. You would click on a specific tour, as you can see here. But this isn't really anything Material UI specific. This is really just React and React Router DOM. So I'm just going to leave that up to you guys. And then over here, when we go to an actual tour, I'm just going to actually hard code it. So no matter what ID you go to, we're not going to dynamically generate it. Later on, you guys can obviously manipulate it so that you can maybe fetch from a database or fetch from the actual data. Because again, I don't want to take some of the time away from Material UI. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and try to hard code this right over here. And we're actually going to do this whole thing relatively easily in the next section. So let's get right into it. In this section of the course, we're just going to learn about many of the other components inside of Material UI. And we're going to do this, of course, by building out this page right over here. So let's begin with what we know. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to, of course, wrap this inside of a container. Because as you can see here, we have this container. So let's go into our home page, or not our home page, our tour page. Let's just completely get rid of this div and let's wrap it with a container. Let's auto import that in. And I personally prefer to get it from /container like so. And in here, we can also say hello just to make sure that everything is a-okay. Now we can also supply this with a width. So we can say sx is going to be equal to width if I want to make this a little bit smaller than usual. So I'm going to say 900 for this. And you can see here that now it's nice and wrapped inside of a container. So the first thing that we need is this typography immersed into the falls, which kind of makes no sense at this point because we're showing Las Vegas pictures, but whatever. So let's go over here and let's add a typography component. So we're going to say typography, and inside of this typography, let's just say something about Las Vegas. I don't know. You know, explore the world. And the reason why it's the world is because Las Vegas, they typically have like a bunch of different architectures from all around the world. They have like pyramids and the Eiffel Tower, etc. So explore the world in Vegas. I've never been to Vegas anyways, but I see pictures. And I also play Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Okay, so over here, what we're going to do is we're going to say variant. And the variant we're going to say is 3. H3. We're going to say that the component is H1 because it's super important. This is the title of it. And also let's give it a margin top of 3. So let's go ahead and save that. And now you can see here, explore the world in Vegas. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to supply it with the image. Now the image is really complicated actually. We have this image, then we have a bunch of these images over here. So this is relatively complex. So what I think is actually a good idea is to create a component for this. I'm going to call this an image list component. So let's go here. We're going to say image collage, maybe collage. I hope that's how you spell it. I'm not sure. Let's go over here and let's create a very simple function-based component that shows us the image collage. So we're going to say image collage. And for now, let's just return a div, an empty div. And then let's go ahead and export default this image collage. So going back over here to the tours, let's actually wrap all this logic inside of a box. I think that makes most sense. So we're going to go here. We're going to wrap it inside of a box. It didn't auto import. Let's say box. Okay, so now it did auto import. I wonder, did we use system before? I don't really remember using that. Let's go to home. Do we have any boxes here? Let's go into tour card. I know we have boxes here. Yeah, we didn't use system. Let's just use this. So let's go back to our tour page. Let's get the box from here. And let's wrap it inside of a box. Again, a box is kind of like a div. So let's give this a margin top that is equal to 3. We're also going to give this a display flex. So let's do this display flex. We're going to say flex. And okay, so that's looking pretty good. And let's give it an image. And I'm going to just hard code this image. I'm just going to go ahead and just copy this image address. You go on the internet and find whatever image that you think works perfectly for you. And you can also put in an alt. I'm not going to do that. And let's also supply it with a fixed width of, let's give it a fixed width of, what do I want to give it? Let's give it 400. So yeah, let's give it 400. Or actually, you know what? Let's give it 325. So now, if I were to refresh, you can see here that we have our wonderful app. So over here, the image is a little bit bigger. Actually, this should be height, not width. We're gonna give it a height of 325. I don't think that's a-okay. We can also give it a fixed width, but I'm not really sure what that width would be. Let's see here. You know what? You guys can go ahead and explore. I highly suggest just pick this exact same image. So that's the first part, but now what we want to do is you also want the image collage. So as the second part. So over here, we want to get this image collage, and we're going to auto import that. And right now, it's nothing, of course. So how can we get this nice, cool image collage? This seems like a relatively complicated thing to get. Well, let's go over here, and we can actually get that from layout, image list. And you can see all of the different image collage that we can have. So we can have this over here, which is really cool. And we can have this. So this is actually exactly what I have here, including the exact same images. And how do we do this quilted image list where we have different sizing between different things? Well, the best thing is just to look at the source code and see how they did it. So they have this list image, zoom in here. They have this list image item. And then in here you can see that they're giving this a width over here and a height for the image. You can see that we have 4 columns, and over here we have the row height. So how high is each row? And then inside of the item, you can see that, you know, we could tell it that, hey, this is going to span, you know, 2 columns or 3 columns or anything else, etc. So over here is all the images as well as the pictures. So let's actually just go ahead and copy this. So this is actually kind of self-explanatory. So let's go ahead over here and let's copy that. And I'm going to go to the image collage and just very simply paste everything in. So let's go here. We're going to just paste it in and we're going to use it, and we're just going to leave it as is because I personally think it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing that I might want to change is this over here. I'm going to say that the width is going to be 300 and the height is going to be 325. And let's also give it a margin left of 1. So now if we were to go here, you can see that we get our wonderful collage. And of course you can change the pictures to whatever it is that you want. So now what do we want to do? Well, the next step is the about the ticket. And this is actually going to be, I think, the easiest thing. This is just very simple typography. So in order to do this, let us go over here to the tours, and in here we're just going to use that typography component. So let's just copy this, and right over here, maybe you can also put this inside of a box. I think that makes the most sense. And you can also separate this into their own separate components, but I'm not going to do that. So we're going to have this box with a typography, and let's give this a variant of H6. And let's give it a component of h4. And let's give it a margin top, we'll leave it as 3. And over here, we're gonna say about this ticket. So about this ticket. And then we're gonna use another typography for the paragraph. So the paragraph is gonna have a variant of, well, paragraph. So paragraph. And then we're also gonna give this a component of P. And then in here, let's give it some lorem ipsum. So all we have to say is lorem, and then we say 40, and we get some random text. So now you can see here that we get everything that we wanted right over here. Okay, so now the next step is the accordion, which is going to ask us a bunch of different questions. So this is going to be relatively similar. Let's actually wrap this in a box as well. So we're going to go over here, we're going to wrap this in a box, and then we're going to say here frequently asked questions. So frequently asked questions. Save that. We're also going to remove this typography because we don't need that. And instead, what we want is the accordion, of course. So let's go into the documentation. So inside of the documentation, what we want to do is we want to find, well, the accordion. So let's go here and let's search. Maybe we can even use the search. We can say accordion, and you can see here in services we find this accordion. So we can go ahead and look for all of the different accordions that we want. You can see here that we get these really cool effects. I think personally I like the controlled accordion. We can also customize the accordions however way we want. I personally like this. This looks really cool for me. So we're gonna go ahead and utilize the controlled accordion. So let's actually maybe take a look at some of the other accordions. Accordion summary. Yeah, I think that's a-okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take this accordion, and let's just look at the source code for this, just so we can understand it. So we have an accordion component, accordion details, accordion summary, and so over here we have this controlled accordion. Okay, that makes sense. And in here, so inside of this controlled accordion, we have, well, a bunch of different components. We have the accordion component, the accordion summary component, we have the typography component. So the accordion summary is going to be just the summary, which is going to be the stuff in here. So you can see here, I am an accordion. So this is the accordion summary, general settings, and then in here the accordion details. So the stuff actually like inside is going to be the accordion details. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's really basic. I wonder if there's actually I think this accordion is a little bit better. Let's actually use this accordion, because this accordion seems a lot simpler. Yeah, and it works exactly the same way. We have this accordion summary, and this accordion details inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all this. Copy. And we are going to go and create a new component for this. I'm just going to call this accordion.js. And for this, we're just going to paste everything in. Oh my, I copied way too much. Let's copy all of this. And let's paste everything in here. And there we go. And that's pretty much really all that we need. So in here, what we can do is very simply just get that controlled accordion, I believe, or accordion. What was it called? I guess it was just called accordion. No, it's called, where is it? Okay, customized accordion. That's what it's called. So we can just get this customized accordions. Auto import that in and pretty much save it. Now, of course, in a real application, what we're gonna have is like this is gonna be fetched from a database, of course, and it's gonna be dynamic for each person. But again, this is just a course on Material UI, and I'm actually not even gonna bother changing these things. You guys can do that on your own. The only thing that I might want to do is go inside here, and maybe instead of some, just margin top, let's also give it a margin bottom. And we're gonna give it a margin of bottom of maybe 2. 2 might work. And there we go. I think that works. So now the very last thing that we need is this right over here. This book now. So you can see here that we have this little footer. So we need to actually add that in. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by going, of course, to the documentation. And there's actually something called a bottom navigation. So we can actually utilize this bottom navigation to get this exact same effect that we want. However, this is going to be a tad more complicated, so let's get to it in the next section. The last thing that we need to do is, well, work on that bottom navigation that we have right over here. So obviously the best thing to do is to go to the docs, and we want something similar to this. So we want to have our content here, and then this bottom navigation right at the bottom. So let's take a look at how this is done by clicking on the source code. And you can see here, okay, we have a list of all the items, blah, blah, blah. And over here, inside of the paper, you can see that we have this bottom navigation. So this is exactly what it is that we want. So let's actually go ahead and copy this paper. And right below the box, and let's give this box a margin bottom of 10. So right below this box, what we're going to do is we're going to add this paper. So do we have paper imported? We don't. So let's go ahead and import that in. So we're going to import paper from, we're going to get that from @material UI @MUI/paper. We should probably do the same thing for typography as well. So let's go here. Let's get typography, and get rid of this typography. And we also want to get that bottom navigation. And we actually do not want the bottom navigation action, so we can get rid of this. We can also get rid of the value as well as the on change. We actually do not need that one bit, so we can get rid of that. And we can also get rid of the show label. We don't really need that as well. In here, all we want to do is just display that one modal. So over here, let's say bottom navigation, and let's go and say hello right in here. So now you can see that, well, we have our wonderful fixed footer, if you will, this bottom navigation. However, the hello itself isn't displaying, and that might be because we need to add the show labels prop. That's probably not it either. I think it might just not display text like this. So let's actually go ahead and now add the modal. Now the modal itself, we're gonna add it in a separate component, and we're gonna call this modal.js. And very similarly to what we've done before, we're just gonna go to the docs and just copy and paste what they have for the modal. For this, we could even search modal. And in here, so what we want is, we want a basic modal, kind of like this right over here. Very simple. So let's actually look at the source code for this. So very simply, all it is a div, a button that's going to open the modal, and then over here we have the modal itself, and it checks whether it's open, and then on close it just closes the modal. So let's copy this. And let's paste that in there. And what is this called? It's called a basic modal. So let's just copy that in. And we're going to just add it right over here. So we're going to say basic modal. And did I auto import that in? Seems like I didn't. Basic modal. Come on, modal. Okay, I guess it's not going to work. Let's go ahead here. Let's say basic modal. And we're going to get that from our components and our modal component. Save that. And now if we were to come here, you can see that we have this open modal, and it works perfectly fine. Now, of course, I want to change the text to book now. So let's go to the modal itself. And to do this, what we want to do is we want to change the button to book now. Okay, so that's really all it is that we want. Now the last thing is we want to utilize the calendar. So we want to have a calendar in here rather than having, well, this random text. So again, as per usual, we're going to do this by looking at the documentation. So let's look at the documentation for calendar. Now calendar is a little bit interesting because this is what we want to use right here, and you can see that we have this thunderbolt, and essentially what this is saying is that this is actually a premium feature. So if you actually just want to display a calendar just like this for Material UI, you actually have to indeed pay for it. So this is going to be a premium feature. However, we can just utilize it for just development and testing purposes. So let's just go ahead and we're going to copy this code. Let's not really worry about what it does. Let's just copy the code. And again, we're going to go in here and we're going to create a date picker. So let's create a date picker component. Date picker.js, and right in here we're gonna paste in that date picker. Now of course what we want to do is we want to display that inside of the modal. So inside of the modal, let's go in here, and now what we want to do is we want to update some things. So let's get rid of the typography. We do not need that one bit. All we want is a box, and we'll leave the styles as is, but what we want to do is we want to display this static date picker range demo. So let's go over here and let's try to auto import that in. There we go, auto imported, and that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and save that. And now if I were to click on, okay, so there's some things that are missing here. So there's some packages that we actually need to install, like MUI5. So let's go to our terminal. Let's just do an npm install at MUI-lab. Go ahead and install that. And that should fix this issue. Okay, there we go. Let's refresh. So now we're getting, okay, so now we also have to install this date functions library. Maybe I should have probably read the documentation. So we're going to say date functions. And I think at this point, everything should be okay. Let's give it some time to download. And let's refresh this. Okay, cool. So now if I click on this, you can see that we get our calendar and we can select it. However, obviously the calendar seems to be cut off because the modal is a little bit too small. So of course, to fix this, what we can very simply do is just adjust the width of the modal. So to do this, we can just go to our modal right over here, and let's adjust the width of this. So over here, the width is 400. What we can do is just completely remove this width just to make it width auto. And if we were to refresh, you can see here that now we have our whole calendar. And of course, obviously it doesn't do anything. Like, this is pretty useless. There's no book now button in here. There's no prices. But again, this is all about Material UI. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's it. So we actually learned quite a lot about Material UI, and I'm happy about it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.